Hey everyone, this is Stan Wengland, and I hope you're happy to see my smiling gray hair and face here this morning. It's early in the morning on the 21st of February, 2022, and I'm about to go bowling with some friends in a short while. But I'm doing something I never do. I never get up first thing in the morning and do a show, but I don't try and watch too much of the news. A little bit in the morning, a little bit during the day, and then I'm a great person. I do a lot of research and read things, and just get into see what's trending in the world or things that I'm interested in, like artificial intelligence and other things. All things of that kind of nature. But this morning, one of my pet peeves came out because it's the mark of, you would always see this with a dysfunctional family or somebody who was codependent or somebody who just could not set any kind of realistics with themselves or anybody else. I'll use a kid, for example. A kid wants to use some kind of drugs, recreational drugs or something. The parent doesn't want them 2 years ago. And they'll say, hey, listen, I know your friends are all doing them and everything, and I know you're going to try, you might try those things, but, if you're doing that, just use common sense. Husbands and wives, the guy's going out with his friends or doing something, drinking and driving, whatever. Those kind of things that are bad for families, that cause grief and everything else like that people disagree on. People fight over them. People get very polarized on them, and then one person can't seem to set a limit. You can't seem to come to any responsible decision. Somebody says, well, if you're going to do that, at least use common sense. If you're going to have sex, Billy, you don't want to get your girlfriend pregnant or anything else like that. So, make sure you use a condom, or she's using birth control, that kind of thing from years ago. And you don't want to get AIDS, or you don't want to get a sexually transmitted disease. You're not going to use common sense now. Well, most people know that in vast numbers of cases, even with adults, the stuff that you'll hear afterwards, why they didn't do those things, common sense went right out the window when the clothes were dropping from their bodies or whatever. You know, do human beings use a lot of common sense? Sometimes, usually not in many cases. Not bad people, they're just people. Today, with all the polarization, with all the sense of entitlement, with all the twisted thinking that's promulgated 24 hours a day, hey man, common sense is a tall order for people. And I heard this today in the context of COVID, of all things. People want the COVID pandemic to be over no matter what. It doesn't matter whether 2,400 people are still dying every day and everything else. The same assholes who 2 years ago convinced you in the beginning of this pandemic that masks weren't necessary, and then had you so masked up, gloved, and you're wiping your food down, giving you all kinds of information. Now we're telling you at the end of this, hey, look, it's time for this to be over. Well, you even see poor Dr. Fauci. He's walking around, he's wearing his mask. He's an older man. He's, older than I am, for crying out loud. So he may have some conditions, but age is a condition too. There are people, regardless of the psychobabble or bullshit that people are spinning. The spin doctors out there, they can make you believe anything. It's not conspiracy theory. It's the way the world operates. People piss down your neck and tell you it's raining. And after a while, if you hear it enough, if the lie is bigger enough, Trump, Putin, other propaganda artists, disinformation specialists in our government, the CIA. I mean, it's common stuff, man. You'll believe anything. So here's the new one people want you to believe. Just use common sense. Sounds good, doesn't it? Use common sense. Use common sense when you don't have any money and you go out and you keep putting money on your charge card. Use common sense when you're morbidly obese and it's giving you diabetes or hurting you, or you can't move around, you can't exercise, and it's of epidemic proportions in our country. I'm not trying to fat shame anybody or any kind of popular term, body image shame, whatever you want to call it, whatever kind of bullshit term you want to call it. Those things. If you smoke, I was a smoker for years. I didn't use common sense. Yeah, and I have the stent to prove it. Thank you very much. It's I don't blame anybody else. I was the idiot who did that. Same thing. It's equivalent of not taking your shot. But I've always owned up to that. That doesn't give me a hero's reward, or like I'm a brilliant person for saying, gee, that was pretty stupid. Anybody ever wake up one morning and saying, want to be an alcoholic or a drug abuser or anything else like that? No, of course not. In my 40 years plus, nobody ever woke up and did that. People fall by the wayside for a variety of reasons, many times by not using good common sense, by not knowing to pull back, by having the proper. There's many things, but common sense is one of the correlated features of that, for lack of a better term. Good judgment. Now, here's my point today. Just use common sense. It sounds good. Let's stop bullshitting. Things are not over. You don't have to freak out. Everybody doesn't have to be masked up 24 hours a day, and it depends upon the situation. But man, do I trust people to use common sense? No, I don't use. And I'll be very honest, I'm not wearing my mask. I never have. For you, there's a portion of it I don't want to get anybody else infected. I'm wearing that mask for me. And I've said that all along. That's my personal responsibility for me. And I know as a sensible, responsible person, it also benefits you. That's a win-win, man. Who wouldn't want that? That's common sense. Now, do people really expect, when I hear governments and leaders now saying, let's just use common sense, we're pulling back like this? You're not using common sense. You're trying to be politically expedient because there's midterm elections coming up, because there's other things happening. There's lots of money depending upon stuff and everything. You're bullshitting again. So the pendulum goes from this way to this way. Mask up, don't mask up. It's okay. Hey, this is a virus. And it's going through stages. And in this stage, many people, they can lighten up. Other people, man, sadly, they can lighten up, but they're going to have to be extra careful. You're going to have to be extra careful. But if you don't want to be, and you choose to make not the right decision, but the responsible decision, you're going to hurt yourself, most likely. Or there's a potential for that, much higher. And that's how Las Vegas makes money. That's how the casinos make money. They know you're not going to make. You go in thinking you're going to lose. That's human nature. So you're going to take, you're going to use the gambler's fallacy. But I don't know, the odds are blah, 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 until it happens to you. And everybody has that stupid look on their face. Gee, I wish I wouldn't have done that, including me. I wish I wouldn't have done all that smoking. I wish I would have taken my statins earlier or whatever, even though they give me muscle cramps and everything. Why? Because I got this freaking stent in my heart, and sometimes I get chest pains and shit like that. That probably could have been avoided. But I didn't use common sense. And I am where I am. And I'm a pretty sensible person. But I had that gambler's fallacy. I was a younger guy. And we do that. And now it's even worse because you get encouragement from people who know better. Like, I know better, and I'm telling you, I'm not telling you to mask up all the time and do weird things. If you need to, then do it. If you don't need to do it, then don't do it. That's just one example. And that's the biggest one. But not really. I want to prove my point. If we were using common sense, and this is for the left and the right, for the crazy stuff that we see in our world, just so you don't think I'm just a grumpy old man that's here that wants the world. The world is never going to be the way it was when I grew up. And it's never going to have in my lifetime, is not going to espouse the values that I firmly believe in. I'm convinced of that, and that's okay. That's the way it rolls, man. And I've said this on many shows, and I guess I'll continue to say it. And these shows are probably more for me than they are for you. It's a way of me getting on the record in the universe, in the cosmos, whether one person listens to it or 1,000, some thought, some idea that maybe does make some sense. Okay? If we were using common sense, would we deny things in science like we do? Would we do that? Would you do that if you're going to get treatment for cancer, or you're getting your car fixed, or we're sending the James Webb Telescope or the Hubble Telescope, the most complicated piece of machinery known to man? That's all made through scientific kinds of means. The same things that put these vaccines together and everything else like that. The same science. But it's applied in a different area. So why is it stupid in this area but okay in that area? And granted that not all applications are equal. That's kind of a weak argument on my part. But, I mean, you've got to look at, if you're using common sense, you've got to look at things not from distorted senses of reality, but some common frame of reference. so that we have a shared reality on things. Not that you can't question it, or science can't be wrong, because it's wrong very, very often. And that's the flip side. That's the, this is why people don't believe in it, because scientists come out one day and say one thing, and then they say another thing another day. And that's part of science. That's a scientific method. Truth is a series of approximations. However, when science becomes politicized, like in this case, so it's okay for the mask to come off, or this culture, this race is inferior, or whether, with eugenics I'm talking about, when people unfairly twisted science against minorities and things like that, for example, or people who were disabled, or older people, or the stereotypes that we see, or younger people, or whatever, or genders. That's what that's my version of psychology of psychobabble. So do we use common sense in science? No, many times we don't. We present it poorly to people who were, at best, poorly trained to even think critically, no less absorb a lot of scientific things. It's not because they're stupid, they're just not trained, they're ignorant. They haven't been taught anything properly. Take the police, we use common sense. Is this a show of just a hit list of things? No, it's letting us know when we have this false illusion of common sense. Do you want to defund the police? Are you crazy if you're on the left? That's my right. This is my left. Are you nuts? I know people say, well, no, you don't understand what that, whatever it means. No, the police, we need police in our world, particularly the way that it is. And police have to go out and they have to be available. They have to be accessible. They have to really want to protect and serve. They have to know their own mission statement, all that other kind of stuff. We've got to have good policing. Effective, efficient, responsive, responsible police, period. Do we need the friggin' Gestapo? Do we need a SWAT group? Do we need people who, you ever see any of these things? Get the fuck on the ground. Shreeze your fuck. Beating the living piss out of people? Do you need to choke somebody? Forget about the overreaction or underreaction from George Floyd. Not to forget about that, man. Do you got to choke the shit out of somebody for that? Or the poor guy in New York, where the guy who's selling cigarettes on the street, and they choked him to death, you gave him a heart attack or whatever. Come on, man. Are you crazy? Or you see these things where the guy's got his hand up in a hallway, and gets shot to death. Guy's a social worker. He's with an autistic kid. They've got their hands up, and he gets shot like 19 times. Or the trials that we see, somebody's in a neighborhood and says, that's just common sense. We're just, we were wondering who that guy was, and they're chasing him all over the place and then shoot him down. What would you do if somebody started chasing you in a truck? Have you ever watched Court Cam? I'm not saying all, it sounds great. Use common, the license that we give to certain judges and stuff like that, these people are out of their minds the way that they treat people. They're out of their minds. How about in what is it, San Francisco, where they've decided that shoplifting isn't a crime? That's common sense. That's insanity. That is insanity. I'm watching films of people just loading up, coming back to the store, loading. Nobody stops them. It's a social economic. Come on. Have you lost your mind? So you're going to tell me the American people are going to sit here and use common sense. You're at the Super Bowl. There's a mandate for people to wear a mask, right? Because here we are. We're right at the end of this thing that's going on and on and on because people won't follow the rules. So here, you want to get back to normal, but you get a fax card and everything. Every goddamn person has their mask off, including the stupid-ass players. Talk about a super spreader. Now, it may not be important to you, but tell that to grandma and grandpa at home, or Billy who's got, a transplant, or somebody who has cancer or something. Are you out of your mind? Why would you do that? It's just a simple thing. If it's required, then you should know that it's required. If it's not, wait till it's over. So you get the police, you get all those kinds of things. How about when you watch things on television and you watch things on the news, or I see people responding on Twitter and everything else, like the constant polarization politically, where, just because the president is Joe Biden, if you're a Republican, You know, that you think he's handling. You know, what a bad guy! He's a communist, and you know, look what he's doing with the Ukraine. That's part of. Are you insane? Do you really think Vladimir? You know, and I hear people say, "Well, what about us? We're not." Well, no, we're not. We do a lot of shady, terrible things. But let me ask you this: do you see anybody using common sense beating the doors down to immigrate to Russia? Do you? How about the place where we get all the stuff from, you know, all, that fills up Walmart and everything else with China? Are there huge numbers of people busting the friggin' doors down to move to China? And if so, why did the Chinese government have to sit there under threat of death trying to hamstring the people of Hong Kong and everything else like that? Why wouldn't Taiwan want to go back and be part of China? Not on your life, baby. How about the people in South Korea? They looking to get into North Korea? Are you mad? Are you insane if you're watching Fox News and listening to the rhetoric of a person like Tucker Carlson, who I've actually defended on my other shows? He has the right to say what he wants to say, but it's just bullshit for ratings. But we're going to use our common sense. Are you using common sense when you think that the January 6th, you know, riots was not an insurrection or not? It was just legitimate political discourse. Are you using common sense? You want to tell that to the family member of the woman who was a rider shot in the face, or the police officers who were seriously injured and died as a result of that? Are you insane? Are we insane as a nation? Have we lost our minds? So if we can't use common sense in those situations, how the hell do you expect us to use common sense when it comes to a mask? We're not using any common sense. We haven't used common sense one bit. Is that gloom and doom? No, that's reality. That's the world the way it is right now. You know? Is it common sense to live in a democracy and say that, you know, we're a democratic country and that here's one for the people from Russia? If I was a Russian, I'd want to hear this. Oh yeah, man, you know, this is the land of the free and everything. But here you do all this gerrymandering, you know, rigging up the election areas so that you can rig it to, you know, for more numbers for Democrats, or rig it for more numbers for Republicans, or try to suppress people from voting because they may vote against you. That's really good in a democracy to do that, to make it as difficult as possible for legitimate citizens to vote. That's a friggin' crime. Is that common sense? No, it's awful. Then on the other hand, what happens when you really have lost your mind, when you have people illegally immigrating to the country, okay, and don't have a process that's efficient and effective to maybe due to the numbers, it's impossible or too expensive or whatever, but they're coming in, and then you say, well, I'm going to let them vote. Really? I'm not trying to deny anybody their right to vote in the country who's working here or being here. But hey, man, you get to vote if you're a citizen. That's the point of citizens vote for their country or their elections in their county. Citizens. I don't get to cast a vote in Red China, or China, excuse me. I'm dating myself. I don't get a chance to cast a vote in Putin's Russia. It's nuts. It's nuts, and it's nuts. And I'll be doing some shows on some other things that are nuts, and I'm going to end this in 1 minute today because I could go on and on and on. You want to have this perfect world. You want to have people who are healthy and happy. That's all we hear. You know, you get kids in school. We got to get them that mask and stop it. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, man. If we had to wear a mask all day and we were playing with sticks and running around like a bunch of stupid idiots, we were as happy as could be. And we got bullied and we got everything else, and somehow or another we cope with it and everything else like that. And so did millions of other people. And I know that's a horrible thing to say. It's very unpopular, and those are terrible things, and they do make people very miserable, myself included. I can remember being bullied, growing up with older kids and stuff like that, and it's no fun. It's terrible. but it's something that happens in life. And I can also remember how wonderful my college and graduate school education was, where I went in there and there was a world that was opened of being able to discuss anything in a liberal arts education, to talk about anything and everything and see people I never believed I would see, like G. Gordon Liddy, or Norman Mailer, or Truman Capote, or Gore Vidal, or Mayor Lindsay, or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, it was amazing, and you didn't have safe places, and you weren't triggered because of seeing George Wallace because he was from someplace else. If you didn't like what he had to say, you stood outside the building with a sign on. You didn't say he couldn't come to the campus. As a matter of fact, we actually had debates about freedom of speech and saying, we were taught that even if we hated what somebody had to say, as critical thinkers, as people in the liberal arts and educated people, we had a duty to hear what people had to say. We didn't shut people down. And we certainly didn't take advice, for the most part, from people like Joe Rogan or, some other celebrity on TV, Dr. Oz. I mean, people listen to crap like that all the time, but there were other people that were, reputable people. It's kind of like vetting, a person for a job, or, vetting information for your, when you're having an academic report or something like that. The information has to be vetted, to be sure. So you get what I'm trying to say? In so many areas, we don't use common sense. And the last one is even something I posted yesterday. It was, I didn't even know it was out there because I'm a big fan on AI and I read it all the time. Things like CPT-3 and Replica. We actually have artificial intelligence devices that provide companionship for children. And the Replica thing is very popular. It only tells you things that are in agreement with you. Who's programming who, man? I doubt that the person is programming an interaction with AI on that. And the CPT-3, take a peek at AI devices without, being programmed to do so, have independent conversations with one another. This is the world that makes common sense. It's just like the need for a police force, but then turning people, loose on people like they're a Gestapo kind of device. It's crazy. You want to have people develop their human potential. I'm not saying technology is bad, but are we insane? That's common sense. I taught human growth and development and childhood and adolescent development. We want to develop with other human beings, as well as understand how to use technology and all the things in our world. What are we doing? So then somebody says, hey, this pandemic is over, or whatever it is. Just use common sense. Beware of anybody who just poos it away and says, just use common sense. That's a lot of political babble, a lot of medical babble, psycho babble, money babble, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, this show went a lot longer than I thought it would because I got a lot on my chest and I could go for another hour. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it stimulates some of your thinking. And if there's just one of you out there who, not in a gloom and doomy way, just, makes you think a little bit, makes you check things out a little bit more, I'll be very happy. Well, you have a nice day, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye now.